When will we reach peak humanity? When will the largest number of people ever walk on planet Earth? And what does this actually mean for Australia? Well, simple question first is, where do we get those population projections from? The most famous big picture global population projection figures come from the United Nations Population Division. And they project that we reach peak humanity at 11 billion people, up from close to 8 billion people today, around 2100. These projections, and they have a different number of scenarios, and that's the most famous middle scenario. But increasingly, the big other demography centers across the world tend to disagree with this view, because we do see that the nations of Africa in particular, they become richer, they become more educated at a faster rate than previously expected, which drives down the fertility rate, and therefore those countries don't grow as fast as expected. So therefore the Wittgenstein Center in Vienna, for example, they expect peak humanity at under 10 billion people by 2070, so that's only 50 years from now. We also have a couple of other projections that suspect peak humanity at around 9.4 billion people or thereabouts at some point in the 2060s. So if you're under 40 today, according to those latest projections, there's a fair chance that you will see peak humanity, that you will actually live in a declining, in a shrinking planet from the human population perspective. Lots of things stem from this. If overall the planet starts to grow older rather than younger, we will then see a global fight for talent, a global competition for young talent, because we do need to make sure that the countries of this planet are young enough to afford to finance the retirement of an ever growing share of old folks. That is difficult to achieve. And we can look at famous examples. Japan, for example. Japan managed to grow old, to grow rich before they grew old. So that means they now had enough money flowing around. The Japanese also completely changed their social contract. That means they allowed women to re-enter the workforce even after they got married, which wasn't the case for a long time. And of course, they doubled down on AI, on automation, to make sure they can run an effective, lucrative economy with an ever-shrinking pool of workers. And these are the trends that you will want to do as a country in a globally shrinking planet. You want to make sure to get the brightest young talent, to make sure that you still have a sizable chunk of workers that can provide enough economic output to finance the old, and you want to make sure that your economy transitions smartly into a knowledge economy, into a high-tech economy that heavily relies on robotics. And I also argue that a superannuation scheme, as we run in Australia, is actually really helpful in a shrinking planet, because you want to make sure that every worker finances their own retirement, which very much isn't the case in a country like Germany at the moment, where we essentially have one big retirement bucket, and you just hope that when you're old that you get enough money back. But in theory, these the funds could be redistributed in different ways, and a superannuation scheme, as we have in Australia, really guarantees that you get your fair share of super. Of course, this only works out for those workers that earn enough money to put enough aside. So there'll be a growing share of poor people in Australia whose retirement does need to be financed through a pension scheme that assists, that supplements the superannuation scheme. So therefore, we must not think that superannuation solves all of our problems just yet. More of this in my column this week in the New Daily. Link, of course, is linked in the video.